What a day, what a day. We are one day out from our retreat, and I am sitting here across the desk from my co-host, Will Schneider. Yeah, you see his hand there. And at the end of the table, who you'll see here in a second, is our good friend, retreat attendee twice, and he's here for his third retreat here in Colorado Springs. And I tell you, we planned this conversation to happen like an hour and a half ago, and here we are. We've been playing with tech. We haven't done an in-person live interview in a couple of years since we had Teresa.
2.5 years or something, yeah.
And we're playing with a whole bunch of new tech, multiple cameras, multiple mics. So hey, thanks for bearing with us while we do this. But we are here to talk today about men and divorce. We're going to talk about the challenges that we experience, the financial, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, the familial challenges that we experience, and we're going to get into that here in just a second.
Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness.
All right, here we are, the three of us. So again, John McCaskill over here. We've got David Valadez, again, our good friend,
special guest,
production manager, and obviously I've got Will over there, and obviously MTM live. Here we are. So again, we're going to be talking about managing and coping with divorce. Our standard little blurbs that we have, we're just kind of playing it by ear. We don't have them, but hey, if you want to know what we're doing, if you want to know what MTM is up to, text MTM to 33777. That'll get you to our social media, our website, everything else. Our Substack, our new Substack to listen,
exciting.
Or rather, very, very exciting. Subscribe there. We've got some sponsors, but I won't mention them right now because I don't have my pre-read in front of me. But hey, we're just going to play all this by ear. But one thing that we always do, we like to do our grounding practice to start it off. And what better way to get us grounded after all this tech fuckery that we've had?
It has been a bit of a clusterfuck, for sure.
And these guys are saints. They are bearing with me. One thing that I learned in the SEAL teams is check your gear early. Never go into the field. Never go into the field with a piece of kit that you haven't used before. And here I am going into the field with a piece of kit that I've never experienced anything with, and it didn't work. So hey, we're making things work. It was like Apollo 13 in here, like figuring out what wires, what cables, what connections worked. But hey, we made it work. Here we are. So that's enough on that. Let's get into our grounding practice. Will, could you run us through that?
Let's get both feet on the floor, everybody, and or at least everyone in this room. And we're just gonna do one breath, just one simple breath, but one really big breath and one deep breath, and really trying to take that breath down into your belly. So let's exhale, push all the breath out. Get really empty, pull the navel in to push all that breath out, out, out. Good, take a big, broad belly breath in. And allow it to fill in the middle. A little bit more all the way to the top. Just hold that breath nice and easy for 3, 2, 1, and exhale out slowly. Let it go out nice and easy like a cool summer breeze on a warm day. That's it. And here we are. Feel a little more grounded, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like it's weird to be in a studio. I mean, a makeshift studio. Like it's another thing in the SEALs teams, I guess, right? You just make a base. Like it's our fort for the day. It feels pretty good.
Yeah, the forward operating base.
I know. It's not the fort we wanted, but this is the fort we got.
That's right.
And you got to go what you got. So I think it's interesting that both of you have been divorced, right? At least once, right? At one time, you each divorced.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I haven't even been married, right? So I have a lot of interesting questions. I feel they're interesting to ask about divorce. But let's just talk about why. Like, why we have this episode. For our listeners, like why do you think this is important?
Yeah, well, we planned this a while back to have this conversation because I think it's an important conversation for men to hear from other men, hear their experiences. But then, like a week and a half ago, maybe actually longer than that, maybe 3 weeks ago, you and I were driving in North Carolina and we saw a billboard that said, "Life is short. Get divorced." And I was like, oh my gosh, really? But
it's a lot of truth in that statement.
There is unfortunately there's some truth there, and the billboard makes it sound as though divorce is very easy or as though it's a good thing, and it might be for your situation, but it's also very challenging, and that's what I wanted to have this conversation with David about. So
Yeah, and I think a couple months ago when we were looking at some of the episodes coming up, and we talked about divorce and getting a professional in there, or getting someone, to come in and talk about it, and we started talking about the everyman episodes, and said, well, how about bringing somebody on just to have a nuts and bolts conversation, not a professional, not some high level guest, but and then both of you chimed in and said, hey, would you want to be on the show? David, would you want to be on the show? And it kind of caught me off guard, and I said, well, sure, why not? Come hang out, talk with the brothers from the other mothers, and they've invited the cousin from a different oven. I mean,
I know, right?
So I said, why not? And that's why we're here, just to talk about the things, the challenges, and aftermath, things that lead up to it, and how do you navigate that alone or together, or there's just so many pitfalls, I think, afterwards, as far as the mindfulness and the emotional piece tied to divorce for men.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we jump in with I'm gonna have a lot. I think I have some really good questions here. I think it's like, so maybe let's start at the beginning of divorce. It's like, so when in each of your situations was like it clear, like, like we've reached a breaking point in the relationship and it's time to separate, or how difficult also was to get to that decision, so
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll jump on that. I'll jump on that first. I mean, complete transparency, I felt very early on that my first marriage was kind of doomed to fail. We fought a lot. We were like oil and water, but I think both of us wanted it to succeed.
Right.
And we tried very hard for it to succeed. I did what I needed to do, or what I felt I needed to do, to try to make it work, and she did her side. But I think, we were married just over 10 years. And I think, about 5 years into it, I think both of us realized, okay, this is not going to work, but we're going to try. And eventually we got to a point where I actually deployed. And because I wasn't there with her, and obviously this is a unique situation, I was in Afghanistan. I was removed from the ability for us to have an argument, say, hey, let's get a divorce, and then the very next day be like, hey, you know what, we're going to make this work.
Well, yeah. That's got to be interesting, you're being away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And communicating, like, sporadically, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
And it's, like, around something that's very difficult, and of course you want to make it, that's what your intention was. I mean, you made those vows, and
right.
I know you, and I know you, and like, you guys take your word seriously.
Yeah.
You know, so you're going to hang in the arena, but keep going.
Yeah, so that deployment actually removed me from the emotional kind of circle that we had been in this whole time. Hey, let's fight, let's talk about divorce, now let's kind of make up. And there was a part of me that, because I was deployed and focused on combat operations, I was like, you know what, this is actually a good thing for me, because now I can remove myself from the emotions and say, okay, pragmatically, what would be the best for the two of us? And it was truly the two of us. I felt that I was not a great husband in that first relationship, and I felt that our relationship wasn't healthy. And thinking long term, I was like, you know what, this is actually going to be detrimental to both of us. So the best thing for the two of us is to actually separate. And we did separate, and then ultimately ended up getting that divorce. And I've also got to backtrack some kind of ironic things that happened, not necessarily in answer to your question, but when we were in the first few years of our marriage, we wanted kids, or at least we thought we wanted kids together.
Right.
And we weren't able to have them, so I went and got tested, and I was told, you cannot have children, period. And then
your sperm count was low.
Yeah, sperm count was low. What is it? The motility or whatever was low.
You had shitty sperm.
Yeah, basically. At least that's what I was told.
As a SEAL, it sounds like a little bit.
You know
like,
what? It's all joking aside. The SEALs actually do have low sperm count because they're working out so often. Yeah, there's all sorts of pseudoscience to that. High stress situations.
Right.
But then she went and got tested because we're like, well, we'll get a donor or whatever. And she was also told that she could never have children with anybody.
Yeah.
So we were both told separately that neither one of us could have children with anybody. And since the divorce, she's been remarried and she's had a kid.
Right.
And I've remarried and I've got 3 kids.
Right.
So, I think it was supposed to work out for one reason or another.
Well, it's almost like it might have been an early sign. It's like, well, you know what I mean? Like some sort of divine thing. It's like, anyway.
And that's a piece, David, we'll obviously get into. That's a complication that I'm very thankful that I do not have. I don't have children from my previous marriage to complicate my current marriage.
Right.
But I'm sure that's a piece that you want to talk about or could talk about, that's not necessarily a good or bad thing, but it could be a challenge. So right. Throw it over to you to answer Will's question, and maybe you can get on that piece as well.
Well, in my situation, my ex-wife had a young son when I met her. He was only 3. And so when we got together, we both came from, I think, chaotic childhood homes in a way. And when we got together, again, she had a young son. Then we found out we were pregnant before we got married. So found out we were pregnant, then decided to run off and elope. And, to most people, this is chaos. You've got one kid, and then you've got another kid on the way, and then decide to get married. So we kind of did things backwards of the traditional, courting relationship marriage. And so that was really the start of our marriage was, one kid in the house and another one on the way. And again, both coming from what I believe are not the most stable young households, our households growing up as kids. Then we came together, and it's almost like we continued that chaos because when you're in something like that, it becomes comfortable.
Sure.
And that's a lot of I think some marriages, when you're already in that turbulence, you think everything's normal and okay, but if you really were to step back and take a look, it isn't. And I mean, we were young. I think I was 23, she was 24 when we got married. Right. So, think about that.
Well, how new was your relationship too, though?
And we were only together for about a year, I think, when we decided, not decided.
So it was a little bit of time.
It was a little bit of time.
But it sounds like the kid, or kind of forced the wedding a little bit.
There was chaos before we got married.
Right.
There was chaos, we're going to have a child. We get married. My daughter was born, and within 2 months of her birth, we decided to move from Washington State to northern New Mexico because of a job opportunity, sight unseen. So again, more chaos, right? So we moved down there, and I think we only spent a year there, and my ex-wife moved back home with her parents. And so again, there was a lot of, there were separations coming back. You talked about, being gone or being separated. So during our marriage, we were together 13 years. We were married about 12, 11 with the extra year of the divorce proceedings, which takes a long time. But during that time, we separated. We came back together multiple times. And, when you're in it, I think you don't necessarily see things or feel that they're as bad as maybe they are. But once you get to a point where, I think we finally got to a place where we both had a conversation, and it wasn't one or the other. One saying maybe we should divorce, and the other one, well, not really. Then let's make this work. And then the other person, we got to a place where we both sat down and actually had a conversation and said, you know what, it might be time for us to go our separate ways. And that was, again, even beyond that. So now we had a third child. So I've raised my stepson. I've got a daughter. Now we have a younger son. And a lot of that was getting to that point of both of us realizing that we're oil and water. We're not really. This isn't working. You can try to hide chaos as much as you want, but children feel what's happening. So to get to that point for us, it took a really long time.
Wow. And that that obviously when we get married, we say our vows, right? And there's a big piece as a man. Well, really, as both, but as a man, you want to be that protector and provider, and I think that also includes that feeling of staying true to your word. And I've had friends who have stayed in a marriage that was clearly unhealthy for them, and it was unhealthy as a display of what marriage should be to their children.
Right. And to their parents as well.
And because of two reasons. One, because they want to stay true to their word, and then two, a lot of them are religious, and they're like, well, if I get divorced, that's a sin.
Right, that's a good point.
And I won't necessarily go down that road, but that sticking to your word, I've always wondered, like, at the end of your life, if you have been in a completely unhealthy relationship, marriage specifically, and you stayed in it for the kids, and the kids, man, they can see when it's not a healthy relationship. They see when people are struggling and it's really toxic for them. Right. And I've always thought, okay, if at the end of your life you say, you know what? By golly, I stayed in this relationship.
Right. And I was fucking miserable.
But it was absolutely miserable. Life, it sucked for me, it sucked for her, and it sucked for the kids. But by golly, I stayed in that relationship.
Right.
Is that why we want to stay in a relationship? Absolutely not.
Right.
So, like, again, I didn't have the kids, but was there any, for you, David, was there ever a feeling in your mind, hey, I've got to stay in this because I gave her my word, and then I've got to stay in this because it's for the kids?
100%. I mean, there's so many times when it was apparent that, this is not working. We should separate. But, my young son, he was, 3. I'm thinking, well, he can't even take care of himself yet. How is one parent, the other thing for fathers in most states is the mom usually ends up with custody and the dads get the visitation, all that. So it's like,
let's come back to that too.
I'm going to lose my kids, and she's going to have to be responsible for 3 children. And, I just wasn't ready so many times when they were younger, when you went through those situations of, we should get out of this relationship, but then you think of these young kids, and that responsibility, for me, some of it has religious connotations, cultural, being,
societal.
My father's Mexican American, my mother's from Spain, I was born in Spain, so you have all these cultural, religious, and like societal expectations, and my parents weren't in the best marriage, and they were staying together through thick and thin, so you get that programmed in you.
Yeah.
And so you do start feeling like a failure if you don't find a way to make it work, and kind of the whole man syndrome of, I'm going to fix this, I can fix this, I can fix this. It's like going to the casino and keep feeding money into the machine. Well, I'm going to win it back. I'm going to win it back. Right. I'm going to go to the ATM and get a couple more $100. No, you're not going to win it back. Right. You're going to feel even worse down the road. So it's really hard when you get stuck in that cycle to pull the ripcord, I guess, in the sense of the military, that, or the stopping smoking cold turkey, whatever. It's really difficult. Really difficult.
Well, I got a couple questions on this. So, from your experience, right, as you both described, it's just hanging in the relationship or just sticking to your word. So if someone's listening and is having those thoughts, like, and the relationship, they just know, just like you guys have explained, like, this isn't working. You both said oil and water, right, as a way to describe your relationships. Like, what would you say to that man out there? Like, that's like, having these same thoughts, like, oh, I don't want to disappoint people. I want to, keep my vows. Right. I don't want to break my word. Like, and that's unmanly, that kind of, what would you, being on the other side of that, like, what would you say to somebody that's struggling right now?
Well, I think, the biggest way for me to summarize that question is, during this mindfulness journey I've been on, and counseling after divorce, getting into a new relationship and bringing baggage to that relationship, and finally getting to a place where I realized that the only person that can make you happy is you listening, and we're talking about you're having these thoughts of divorce. It's like you are the only one that can make you happy.
It's Leo.
Right.
Leo. We're talking about Leo's married. Yeah. Leo's in his
Watch out, Leo.
That's right.
We see you out there, brother.
If you're not happy and you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of others. You cannot. And so if you're there suffering and in pain or unhappy, or you're lashing out, whatever, everyone around you is feeling that. Your kids are feeling that. Your family's feeling that. You can't heal unless you start loving yourself and taking care of yourself. So it's hard to get out
Right.
of that, but that's the only way I think you can begin the recovery process, is to make that decision.
And get
start,
out and be free.
and start working
right.
on yourself to then become
Right.
the person you want to be to your kids, to your family,
Yeah.
to your friends.
Well, that brings up my next point. Unless, John, you want to elaborate on what...
I mean, yeah, I'd just like to say that, I'm again coming back to that kind of point of pride, like,
Yeah,
oh, yeah,
of
I
course.
sucked it up. When you really take a step back and you say, okay, why are we here? Not why are we in this relationship, but why are we as human beings here? And I always like to think that we are here to make the world a better place, to make each other a better human being, to support one another, and then to enjoy life. Like,
Right,
I really
right.
hope that that's a part of life, is to
Whoa,
enjoy
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And if you can take a step back and say, you know what, by my being in this relationship, I am not making myself better, I'm not making her better, I'm not making my children better,
Anybody around
I'm not
you.
making anyone around me better.
Right, yeah.
When you can see that, and there's nothing that you can do to change that, like you can't flip this switch and that toggle and then things are going to improve. I think at that point you need to seriously have a conversation with your significant other, a heart to heart, not a yelling match, but a heart to heart, and say, you know what, I know we came into this thinking this was going to be a forever thing, but I'm not making you happy. And I hate to say this, but you're not making me happy. We're not making.
You
one
make me
another
happy, John. don't leave me, John. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So yeah. So obviously, that type of conversation needs to be had with the other, but also a conversation with yourself. I think those are important things to do. And then once you can separate yourself from the emotions, like one or the other is gonna be like, no, don't leave me, or maybe they'll be like, yeah, let's call it quits.
Right.
But yeah. But if the other person says, hey, you know what, don't leave me, we shouldn't do this, we can fix this, try to separate yourself from the emotions, because that emotion can keep you in the relationship much longer than you should. And then when you start to get mindful about it and think pragmatically, rationally, that's when you can say, okay, yeah, I think we should move on. Take our own.
Yeah, and that was a great point when when we're talking about having a heart-to-heart with your partner, wife, spouse, husband, whatever it is. But you also do have to have a conversation with yourself, because I think something that we overlook when we're in that place is, in our heart of hearts, we already know whether it's doomed, whether it's can be salvaged, or that you need to make a change, but we don't trust in ourselves. And that's all a part of, trusting yourself, loving yourself. It's, you already know in your heart. I mean, that is a hard thing to really make that step. It's scary.
Right.
It's scary.
Well, that brings me to my next point. It's like you were 23, 24 and you got married. You were...
I think I was 24, 25.
24, 25,
yeah,
right?
young.
So how much should being young and dumb youth, you know what I mean? Like, or just inexperienced, have to play in these decisions? Also, were those decisions like, when I pictured my life, like I thought I'd follow my dad's kind of path, and like my dad got married at 27, so like, oh, that sounds like a good age for me. Yeah. And then I kind of got to that age, and then I got in a relationship, and I broke up, and it, I've talked about it on the show, it changed my life. Breaking out of this relationship that I was in, not married, but so how much, how do youth, like what was, I mean, if you could look back, was it just, this is what you do, or it's like you met the right girl, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
That was a big piece for me, is that this is what you do, the societal expectations.
There you go.
Like, I'd gone from high school to college, essentially, from college into the real world for long enough, and then I was like, well, the next box that we're supposed to check per the societal checklist, societal to-do list, is get married, and then have children, and then have a career, and then
retire,
and then die.
And then die, and die an unhappy man, you know what I mean? Like, or just sacrifice, so much of your time and your energy and like who you are, or just, by just, living into an ideal that doesn't seem very idealistic for a lot of people.
Yeah. And then absolutely being young and dumb.
And the dumb in the sense just inexperienced.
Yeah, inexperience.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I feel that I'm much wiser now. I will say this.
Oh yeah.
I will say my first marriage made me a much better husband in my subsequent marriage. I won't even say subsequent. I will say final marriage. Becca, if you're listening, sweetheart, I love
This
you.
This is
it. You're stuck, baby.
He's gonna recite his vows at the end of the episode. So I'm just kidding. Yeah,
that's right. So yeah, but I think I'm a better husband. I think I'm a better person, and I have a I won't say good relationship with my ex, but I would say amicable.
Yeah.
Like
you could be in the same room together.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be tough. I haven't physically been in the same room with her for 10 plus years, 11 years. But I have had phone conversations. Have to stay in touch with her because there's a military retirement that has to be split, which is definitely another piece that we could talk about for our military listeners. There is a retirement piece that she gets, which I'll come back to it. But when you ask, but yeah, I think that coming back to your question here, that young and dumb, the societal piece. Yeah, absolutely. Had a lot to do with it. And I think that in today's day and age, so this is 20 plus years ago, I think that's changing. I don't think the societal pressure is there as much. I think the younger generations are launching later.
And they're not even having sex right now, apparently.
I read this book called Generations, and it explained that because of the easy access to pornography, and we're actually having an episode on that in a few weeks with Elise Michaels. The easy access to pornography, the effort that it takes to go out and meet other people in person in order. I don't know, right? But it's effort, and they don't want to. They're like, you know what? I'd rather stay at home with my pornography, both men and women. But not everybody. Obviously, I'm not talking about everybody. But that's. I've lost my train of thought.
It's okay. We'll go to David. Youth. Like,
I mean, on that? Again, being super young, I think at that point in my life, so my dad passed away when I was 16. So, this was only a few years later. I don't think I had dealt with any of that. So I was an angry young man. When I met my ex-wife, I'd just gotten kicked out of the military. I went in the military. We're basic training. I got chosen for officer candidate school because the Army is like the only place, if you have an associate's degree, you might get lucky if you're in the infantry. And I got chosen, but I had broken my foot year before playing soccer, and I broke it again during boot camp. They just sent me home. They said, "See you later. You got an existed prior to service." So I thought, hey, I got my future planned out. I'm going to be in the military. This is great. Got sent home, and again, I don't think I dealt with a lot of stuff in my life. Met my ex-wife, and when you're young, you get flooded with all the hormones and all the all the dopamine, everything feels great when you meet somebody or something new, and you're like, this is cool. And again, she had a young son, and I thought, hey, I don't want to deal with my shit. I'm gonna go save her. I'm gonna be the hero complex or whatever. I'm gonna take care of her. I don't have to figure me out, and I think
avoiding.
And so I took too many things into that relationship, and to your point earlier about having kids involved, there's another complication there with having to raise somebody else's child, and so we didn't have a great start. But you're young, and I think I'm 23. I know everything. I can handle this. I can fix anything, and I'm not going to fail, and I mean, it just, I think those things compound, and, all of us are carrying around like this Santa Claus sack of shit. There's not presents in there. It's just stuff you collect as you go through life, and at some point you have to drop that stuff. You have to start emptying it out to put good stuff in, and so I took a lot of my baggage from my youth into that relationship, and I hadn't really worked through some of those things to start a good marriage or to be a good husband or to be a good father. So, there's blame on both sides, but I acknowledge what I brought in, and it wasn't a lot of good stuff. I was lost and not really sure who I was at that point, and I don't think I felt like an adult till I was like 26 years old. I feel like I woke up one day and I was like, oh shit, I'm a grown man. I need to change some things. But by then, again, a lot of things that had happened already.
I got to come back to that baggage piece, because that's a piece I didn't really think about until you just mentioned it. But I absolutely had some baggage that I brought into my marriage. So at the Naval Academy, I dated this girl for a year and a half, 2 years, long distance relationship back home in Louisiana. And, I was head over heels with this girl. And then, I got selected to go into the SEAL teams, and she was like, well, what's going to happen to me? I was like, well, I plan on staying with you. What do you mean what's going to happen to me? We're going to graduate, and we're going to get married and all this stuff. And she's like, you know what? I don't think I could be a SEAL wife.
This is not the woman you married.
This is not the woman I married. This is my girlfriend.
Right.
So my ex-girlfriend.
Right, so you're even younger now.
So I'm even younger. Yeah, so I'm 21, 22.
Yeah.
And then I graduate, but my heart was broken. And we've had a conversation about this girl in the past. We've had our conversations about broken hearts.
Yeah.
That was a huge heartbreak for me. And then when I was at SEAL training, I was set up with my soon-to-be wife, or future wife at the time. And I was like, oh, this is a way to fix that, right? The rebound. And if she ever watches this, she knows this. But there was a piece that was a rebound. Now, I ended up falling completely in love with the woman that I married, but initially it was a way to overcome my heartbreak. So that was some baggage that I brought in.
Wow.
And I hadn't processed that. I didn't give myself time or space to process that. Now, since then, I've obviously had time and space to process a lot of it in the marriage.
Right.
Yeah,
That's when it's got to come out.
Yeah, it does. I think for a lot of men who are listening, for anyone who's listening, if you're going into a marriage with a lot of baggage, I think that's stuff that needs to be either worked out before, like work it out on your own, or B, make sure that it is something that is discussed openly and your soon-to-be spouse realizes that you have that baggage and it's not some hidden baggage that pops up in the middle of the marriage. You're like, oh, by the way, I have all this, right?
Right.
So.
Wow. Cool. Thank you. All right, let's move into... All right, so you are divorced. You're divorced. Papers are signed. You're separated. You're out of the house. What are those first days, weeks, months like, moving through this in a new space in your life, Like, what was, like, David, what was it like those first...
Yeah, I remember, the conversation I spoke about earlier when we both decided, it's time. That was probably, it was at the beginning, I remember it was the beginning of December, and we made this decision, and we said, okay, let's get through the holidays, let's stay together, we won't really let the kids know, let's get through the holidays, you can start looking for a place, let's figure out how we're gonna sell our house, what are we gonna do? So we got through the holidays, and comes January, we'd found a place for my ex-wife and the kids to live, because again, we wanted to sell the home. So we got her moved, and I remember the day I moved her into this place and got them set up, and I remember leaving, and one of my buddies, one of my coworkers at the time, cool dude, he was a little bit older than I was, and he had gone through a divorce, and he said, hey, David, give me a call tonight. Let's go grab a movie. Let's, and he kept saying this, and I thought, okay, whatever. And I remember leaving that home, and that was the first time it's like, wow, I'm not going to see my kids tomorrow.
Oof.
And I especially thought about my little guy, because he was, I think, 6 at the time, and it was like, so I've been in his life every day for the last 6 years, and now I don't know when I'm going to see him again. So it really hit me. And as I drove away, I called my buddy and I said, hey, I'll take you up on that movie. And I don't even remember what we watched, but I remember just sitting there and being and he literally just kept, it's what you guys are trying to talk about here. I never got it then, but he knew I needed him, and it's like almost he was telling me, hey man, I love you, I got you, I'm here for you. And all he kept doing was just kind of like hitting my arm, or hey, you good, or
it's
oh,
the
that was
way men
funny.
express love.
Yeah,
right? It's like
was,
not coming like, dude, I'm worried about you. I know he goes through shit.
Right.
It's like, oh, come on, let's go get a
it
beer.
was very
let's go
interesting.
get a movie. Sorry,
but,
I know.
Yeah,
It's better than nothing. Man.
Better
Right.
not. No, I know.
Yeah.
Just like,
And then for the next, it took a few months or whatever. To your point of earlier about feeling like a failure, I'm a man, I'm gonna make this work. I started feeling myself falling into this place of, man, I failed. I failed as a husband. I failed as a father. How did I not make it work? So, it's all those the steps of grieving.
Yeah.
You're going
For
through.
each one.
You just start cycling through this, and so it was interesting. At first, it was like, this is great. I got him moved in. Or amicably separating, whatever. And then you start going through the cycles. Your mind takes over. The imposter syndrome, whatever. Doubting yourself, and it was really hard for those. Not even the first few months. I would say it was hard the first probably couple years, and that's when I started doing some work, and my
self-work.
Yeah, self-work, and my current wife, we were dating at that time during those couple years, and the good thing is I was in Portland, she was in Seattle, so we were far apart enough away from each other where I didn't just, hey, I'm gonna go drive over and hang out tonight, and we're gonna watch Netflix, and I don't have to deal with my shit. We were apart long enough where I had to do some work,
good.
and she was also getting divorced, so it was good to have a partner to go through counseling, read books, whatever together. But still, it was really hard to carry that because I wasn't very open. I was private about those things. I didn't really share it, not even with my close friends, my family. It's like, I didn't want to dump that on them. Oh, I don't want them to worry about me.
Sure.
I spent all the time thinking, what are my kids going to think about me? What are my in-laws going to think about me? So you just start self-sabotaging all these
and
thoughts.
isolating,
So
it
it's
sounds like,
isolating
in some ways.
too.
So
yeah.
would you have done it differently? Or like someone's listening out there, it's like, would you?
Yes. I mean, I think the people that care about you most, your really true good friends, best friends, your family, all of us have family that maybe aren't the best family, but you know who the people in your family are. Sometimes it's your siblings, sometimes it's cousins, a trustworthy aunt, uncle, whoever it may be. Those people do care about you, and you can go to them because we don't want to put burdens on other people, especially men. I think our generation is breaking a lot of that. I think a lot of that's generational, but I think we're getting better at it, and what Men Talking Mindfulness is doing is helping people talk about this stuff. But yeah, I would tell people. I would just let them know. It's like somebody having a loved one who dies. You hear this all the time. It's like people don't know what to say to me. Well, if you talk to them about it, that makes them feel good. It helps them.
Right.
And I think a lot of me being here, I was a little nervous and I wasn't sure, and I thought, okay, can I share my story? But a lot of this is I wouldn't wish that loneliness upon anybody. I want people to not isolate themselves, to open up, to look for help, to talk, because people do want to help you. Men do want to help each other out. They do want to.
What do you think? Men want to solve problems and give solutions. It's like, what's another big way to do it? It's like, hey man, I'm feeling like shit. Can you help me out? Imagine most men are going to rise to the occasion.
Yeah. And one quick caveat on that too is sometimes that dude, that man, that uncle who are like, oh, I don't want to hear your shit. That might be their initial response because they're uncomfortable.
Right.
But then those are the ones that will come back around and open up, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And they will do the most amazing things for you.
And you're also opening each other
right.
up,
So
which
don't
is
write
like a
those
big deal
people
for
off.
them.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I don't want to jump right into the. So now you're separated. All the papers are signed because it's not that easy.
No,
and I didn't even have kids in the mix.
Right.
But when we finally decided, hey, we're going to separate ways, part ways. Obviously, we'd been married for 10 years at this point, and our homes were our home was in the same. We shared the home, we shared the mortgage, we shared the deed. We had bank accounts that were shared. We had cars that were shared, phones. I mean, some of the stupid shit. You're like, oh, we share a Netflix account. Like, how are we going to separate that?
Yeah.
Then you got to go through all that and you're like, separate that, and you're like, well, she also has my passwords to I don't know, Facebook, whatever.
Yeah,
And you're like, okay, well, I've got to change my password. So there's a lot of that little stupid administrative minutia that you have to go through. And then on top of that, there is that grieving process before you ever even sign the paperwork. You're like you said, I feel like I'm a failure. I'm denial, then the acceptance, and all the different phases there. And as you're going through those, there's a part of you that's like, you know what, man up, suck it up, you can make it through this. And then there's other people around you that they might not say that, but you think that's what they will say. You assume that people, especially other men who have been through divorce, like there's some men that I know, specifically in the SEAL teams, our divorce rate is ludicrous, really high. And some guys pride themselves on how many times they've been married. Like, I've been married 8 times. I mean, I don't know anybody who was literally married, but it's almost like a badge of honor. And if you go tell them that you're going through your first divorce, they're like, dude, that's just a practice round, right?
Everything's a competition.
Yeah,
right? It's like fucking the dumbest.
It's so
shit.
stupid. But you have to, and that comes back to that, toxic masculinity.
Totally.
And again, when I say the term masculinity, I'm not.
That is toxic. When
That's
you're like,
toxic.
instead of like coming to
That's toxic.
saying to them, like, hey man, like, yeah, I know it could be rough right now because I remember my first divorce. It's like, oh, suck it up, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I'm on number 3. Like that's toxic. That's toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
You're not helping anybody,
Right.
and you're just expressing your own anger and your own frustrations for you. I'd imagine in those circumstances, not taking care of your shit.
But
you know
your
what I mean?
boy, who was like, hey man, let's go grab a beer and a movie.
Right.
That's masculinity, and it's not toxic. You're there to support your brothers.
Right.
So that's some things that happened before the papers were signed. Finally, the papers were signed, and then there's actually like a sigh of relief. You're like, okay, I'm through this administrative bullshit, and now I have to start processing the emotional stuff all over again.
And I imagine some of that administrative stuff gets even more complicated if you're not having a friendly separation with your spouse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, even to have those conversations, be like, hey, about like passwords, about bank accounts, about houses. It's like, I imagine every opportunity in like, if it's a toxic relationship, is a way just to fight.
Yeah.
And guilt and shame one another.
Right. Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. You gotta have that's when you have to get legal.
Right. And so it gets more expensive too.
Oh, for sure. And I will say something that I've seen more recently, which is I think the whole point behind that billboard
that brought us to this episode.
That kind of brought us to this episode or a piece of it, is that there are men's lawyers out there, and I want
interesting.
You talked about
like men only lawyers. That's pretty cool. Come on.
well, because there's a
Men Talking
movie,
Law.
There's a movie called The Red Pill, and it's all about how men are vilified, but we're also the ones who die earlier, work some of the more dangerous jobs. And please,
100%.
if you're listening to this is not a zero-sum game. I am not saying that when men are not respected, that women are. I'm not trying to minimize women here.
No, of course not.
We can all respect one another, and it's not a zero-sum game. By respecting you, I'm not disrespecting women, right?
Right.
But anyway, this movie, The Red Pill, it goes into how men are typically the ones who, like you mentioned, get visitation, and the women get the rights to actually have the custody of the children. And how often that happens, even when the woman doesn't have a job, the woman may have been, she may have committed some type of adultery, she may have drug problems. A lot of the time, it still falls to the woman, and I've seen that happen in some of my friends' relationships. But yes, there are men's lawyers out there to help you defend yourself, make your case. I'm not saying necessarily that every single man is right. I obviously know very many men who have been wrong in the relationships.
Right.
But then there's also, I believe, men like myself and David who are, it was just not a good relationship, and we realized that.
Right.
Now, having kids in the mix, man, I saw you starting to get emotional, and I totally feel that, man. I could empathize, and not empathize because I had kids in the situation, in my divorce, but I could empathize because, I mean, hell, when I leave for a week, I miss my kids.
Right. Yeah.
And I was gone for 2 days. I came back today, and I saw my kids, and my kids were jumping on me and loving on me, and
Daddy!
yeah, exactly. It was awesome. So I can only imagine what that felt like for you, David.
Especially a 6-year-old too.
Yeah, I mean, that's like my son.
Yeah.
My son is 5.
Yeah.
You know, and I love him to death. I love all 3 of my kids to death. You know, there's different relationships with all 3 of them, but I can only imagine what that felt like for you.
Yeah, it's interesting when you were just talking about the financial piece too. You know, earlier, Will, you asked, what would you do different? And that reminded me that that's something I would do different too. There was a lot of arguing and bickering and fighting. You know, it was like, okay, half of nothing is nothing, and great, now we're going to lawyer up and each spend another 20 grand to fight over. You know, I mean, we had homes and cars, but stuff's not paid off. There's not a lot there, and standing your ground, like on my principles, or this is right and that's wrong, and it's like, what is the now I look back and go, there was no point in any of that. There was no point in fighting to be right, or you're wrong, even if they are wrong. It's like there isn't any point in that, because it just prolongs everything, and it's that's another thing I would change. I wouldn't have fought so much or argued about silly little things. It's like, okay, well, I'm gainfully employed, and I can go make more money, or like whatever. It's like, we're gonna fight over an RV camper that's not paid for. Why? That's something else I would change. It really isn't worth it, because when you rip those Band-Aids off, and then, or you get a wound and then you just keep picking at it, it's never going to heal. And the sooner you can get through that, you heal faster. The relationship with your kids, you can go through that process quicker. So that's something I would change as well. It's sometimes it's not worth it, and money doesn't make you happy. So why are you going to fight over it anyway?
The old adage: do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy?
Yeah, exactly.
And
100%
very
true.
And how much energy you talk about money, but how much energy are you going to put into fighting? And I think that's where a lot of men,
big time,
just give up. And I'll be honest. I was like, you know what? I just want to be done. I'm tired. I'm not going to fight this.
Yeah.
So like, all the paperwork, I gave her what she asked for. There wasn't a whole lot of fighting. I was like, so I had what's called the post 9/11 GI Bill, which is if I served X amount of months after 9/11, then you get 36 months of college paid for. Now I already had my degree, I already had my master's degree, so I transferred it to my ex-wife. And even after we divorced, I was like, you know what? You can have that. You can go and pursue your educational pursuits. You can go and do your education. But that was me in a way. I was like, you know what? This is me helping her to become a better person, even after our divorce. But it's also not worth fighting over.
Right.
Coming back to the military piece too, because we were married for 10 years, she gets a quarter of my retirement. Which is a pretty hefty chunk.
Yeah.
I retired in 2020 as an 05 military Navy commander, and it's a pretty nice chunk of change every month for the rest of my life. And as long as she's alive, she gets a quarter of that. Now here's the kicker. In a lot of divorce decrees, you need to pay attention to what the divorce decree says about your retirement. Because there's what's called the survivor.
In the military or just anywhere?
Military retirement.
Okay,
Sorry. Thank you.
No,
Good point.
of course, yeah.
Because in the military, there's when you retire, there's a thing called the survivor benefit plan, and the survivor benefit plan is basically life insurance that gets paid to your spouse should you die, right after retiring. So like, my ex-wife right now collecting 25%. Our divorce decree said that I had to pay into this survivor benefit plan, which is a life insurance plan through the military, and if I were to die today, she gets a raise.
Wow.
It goes from 25% to 50%. To my ex-wife. Now, luckily, there's a catch that if she got remarried and she stays remarried until age 55, then I'm out. But if she gets what she has, she's gotten remarried. But if she were to get a divorce, I have to start paying into that again. And if I die, she gets a raise. And my wife now, with whom I have 3 children, gets nothing. Aside from the life insurance that I'm paying in separately.
Right.
But from this survivor benefit plan, my wife now, with whom I have 3 children, gets nothing.
Interesting.
Isn't that crazy? That's
Wow.
It's called the Former Spouse Protection Act. So if you're listening to this
Yeah.
and you are military considering divorce, make sure that your divorce decree does not say anything about the survivor benefit plan and having to buy into that. That is one thing that I wish I'd known and one thing I would have fought. But because I was lazy and because I wanted to wash my hands and be done with
And
it.
you're young.
And I was young. I was just like, you know what? I'm ready to move on.
Right. I'm so frustrated. I can imagine those arguments. Yeah.
And you know what? I didn't do my due diligence in
Right.
reading the paperwork, like the
Right.
fine print. Now
That's what I was gonna say, the
I
fine
went
print.
back and read it years later, and sure enough,
It's there.
she could get this raise, which is just insane. So anyway, I can
No.
get on the soapbox about
No,
that.
yeah. I mean, what you were saying earlier about the fighting, it sounds like also that fighting is generated from the feelings of the frustration and the guilt and like the failure in the relationship, and it's like you're kind of bickering at one another and looking at each other as the problem
Right.
instead of like realizing, taking responsibility for how you're showing up in the marriage or the
No,
choices
you're
that you
right.
made, or what have done things
It's easier to
differently.
blame someone else.
Yeah, of course,
You're not in a
always.
good headspace. Yeah.
Always, and it's like, and I know, like, I mean, because I'd imagine a lot of the divorces that are out there, like, started or the marriage started young.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know ourselves
Yeah.
as well.
No.
I mean, I know my journey to get to where I am has like been long, and I don't even have like that marriage, that relationship, or that divorce. But it's it takes a long time unless you have like maybe a fantastic dad. Most people don't have fantastic dads or
Yeah.
great families, like in a lot of ways, that are able to kind of bring you into your masculinity, bring you into your
Right.
manhood.
Right.
And that might be part of the problem. Actually, I'm reading Wild at Heart with John Eldridge, and he talks about all that. And I want to get him on the show. He's actually in Colorado Springs.
Oh, yeah,
in the book,
that's
he
right.
talks about hiking into the Gardens of the Gods, which
Oh
is,
man,
which
maybe
is
we
incredible.
can just meet him this weekend.
Yeah,
That's
that'd be
right.
great. Yeah, but anyway, I mean, it's like, so that's another journey into masculinity,
Right.
but like that's going to make a big difference into how you're showing up in a relationship, and also choosing the right woman.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, we talked about why it's not easy. I guess, when does it get easier? I guess unique, of course, in each situation. But was there a moment where just like, that it just happened to be a little bit different than the struggle, I guess? Or maybe it was just time, was it,
Yeah, I think a lot of it is time. I think for me, having children involved,
Yeah.
you see how it affects them. They're young, they're impressionable, and it took a long time for me, doing work. I did go do some counseling, and I was never a counseling person, and when I finally was able to do counseling, it was because I found the right counselor. I mean, that's one thing. I'll tell that to any man out there. If you're going to find counseling, same thing with knowing your heart. Within the first session, first 10, 20 minutes, if you are going to be able to trust this person, because you need a lot of trust with a therapist or a counselor. But counseling, again, my current wife, she was going through the same thing. So she is an amazing woman who does a lot of work on herself, who was all about therapy, would get books that were recommended. She'd read the book, she'd share it with me. We were able to talk about a lot of things, so she helped me with a lot of that. But I think when it finally got to a really good place for me, it took a long time. It took for my kids all to be young adults, and for them to finally like see me with their own eyes and make up their own minds about, they realize they have a relationship with me that's just with them, and then they have a relationship with their mother that's just with her. It's not parents. It's not a relationship with parents now. It's an individual relationship with, my
This is
ex-wife.
my dad, that's my mom.
Yeah, right, because we are different people, and we are now separated, divorced different people, and, they have to refigure out how to interact with each one of us. But for me, it was really to see them get to that place where they start to know themselves. They start to know me. Like, they don't know me as dad. They know David, the human, the person. Like,
Right.
I actually pay attention to what my dad does for work, or what do you like to do, Dad? What's your favorite color? When they start interacting with you that way, it's like, oh, they've never asked me that in my entire life. And I think a lot of it for me was a ton of consistency. I used to get really frustrated and feel like, because they lived with my ex-wife, she had control and really would guide them. But I just stayed true to who I believed I was and the way I thought I should parent, and whether it was parenting, discipline, risk, reward, whatever, expectations with school, and there were some really, really hard times, but I stayed consistent. And then at one point, it's like they turned towards me instead of away from me, and then I felt like, man, I did it. I did it. I got myself and my ex-wife. We got out of this toxic relationship.
Right.
It was not good for my kids, and to finally see them like cross the threshold helped me, because to John's point earlier, and to everything we've been talking about, I feel responsibility for them. I feel responsibility for their lives, and
Right.
when you feel you failed or affected them negatively, to see them get to a better place, help me take that big deep breath and exhale and go, all right, I'm still doing a good job as a parent.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, time heals all wounds.
True.
But I was immature in what I did with that time. I decided to sink myself completely into my work, completely into the gym. I worked out like a fiend.
Like running away in some ways.
Yeah, running away.
Right.
Literally and metaphorically.
Right.
And I was eating nothing but like chicken and broccoli. I was like, okay, well,
You get lean.
Now I got to get tough. I got to get sexy. But that was also my mentality. I was like, okay, I don't have time to think about this. I don't want to give myself. Yeah, that's more accurate.
Right.
I had the time, but I didn't want to give myself the time to process it.
Right, and to feel it.
Yeah,
to be with it.
To feel it. It was
That's
scary.
a big
It was
thing,
uncomfortable.
to feel it.
Yeah. And so I sunk myself into everything else. Working out.
Right.
Like,
all anything
fun,
right.
fun with the guys,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Fun with new girls.
yeah, and then you're gonna love this piece, man.
Yeah.
I did the P90X yoga.
Okay.
You're familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and at the end of that, I lay on my yoga mat and I just stared up at the ceiling.
Shavasana.
Yeah, but it
No,
wasn't
I'm
even
sorry,
the
I'm sorry.
guided
Yeah, I'm
Shavasana.
sorry.
It was just me staring at the ceiling.
Yeah.
Everybody had left, and I bawled my eyes out.
Wow.
And I was like, what the fuck is happening?
I'm a military man. I
Yeah,
can thrash you
and
in
then I
crying.
realized, oh wait, man, I just tapped into something that I've been pushing off for a long time.
Through yoga. A lot of
right?
This happens a lot in the studio.
Yeah.
It does. It really does. Like, anyway, I mean, because you're like, because I guess you get so relaxed. I mean,
Right.
I know, like, you get so relaxed, and then stuff starts to come to the surface.
Yeah, so it bubbled up, and then I was like, okay, I need to do something.
Yeah.
And that's actually when I started seeking counseling for, I had some other mental health challenges, anxiety, survivor's guilt from
Okay,
the
well,
past.
that's going on at the same time,
It's,
too.
yeah,
Jesus
so a lot
Christ.
of this is going on simultaneously.
Right.
And then I was like, you know what, I gotta sit down and talk with somebody. And this guy says, yeah, I want you to try mindfulness.
Wow, and it comes full
And,
circle.
Yeah, full circle, man.
Right.
Here we are. So
Yeah.
that counseling, I will say that the exercising did help.
Yeah.
In
Both ways. It helped and hurt.
It
'Cause
helped
you're running
and hurt.
away,
Yeah, I
but
was running
also
away,
like you're not
but it
as like
also-
angry, frustrated, and shit. Yeah.
I think doing it to a point of obsession
No,
wasn't
well,
helpful.
right. Well, yeah.
But doing it
yeah.
to a point that it was healthy, that's great. It's going to help me.
Was better than isolating,
Yeah.
staying at home,
Oh,
like
for sure.
binge watching,
And
whatever.
when I did, I
taking
surrounded
drugs.
myself with a crew of guys that did these workouts with me, like
Yeah,
2-3 hours a day in the gym. It was ridiculous. I did
Kick-ass
this,
dudes.
it's called the horseman workout. It's a fucking ridiculous routine, but
Is that like a military thing, the horseman
yeah, it's
workout?
put together by some guys at SEAL Team 6. It's
Oh, is
legit.
Irvin part of that? Or Irvin? Chris?
Chris probably helped put it together.
He probably
But
designed
anyway,
it. Hi, Chris.
yeah. So this workout, but I didn't just do it on my own. I surrounded myself with people doing it with me, and that helped me. That did help me. Now, again, to the obsession point, probably not healthy, but working out with a crew that's there, that was great. But then the processing it through the counseling and then the mindfulness and meditation were game changers.
Wow.
And then obviously with time.
Right, well, time
was
in all
huge.
of that,
Yeah,
right?
time with all
right,
of it.
right.
Yeah.
Being with
Yeah.
instead of running away, which
Yeah.
makes a big difference.
Yeah.
I think, like I say, a couple more. I think, right? We're good on time, right?
Yeah.
So I think, how did this help you? Well, let me see. How did this help you grow? Like, your divorce. Like, what? Or like, how has this changed you? Like, so either one, or maybe a little. I think they're a little different, but so how's it helped you grow, or how's it helped you change? As like, okay, let me ask, like, as you, just John McCaskill, as like who you are, but then also, with your wife and with your kids, and maybe in other relationships. And same thing, David, when we get there.
Yeah, so I would say that, like I said earlier, I think my previous marriage has made me a better husband now. I look back at who I was in my previous marriage, and I was, young and dumb again, coming back to that. I was my priorities. I liked to say that my priorities were God, family, country, and all the patriotic things. But what were my priorities? Work, the SEAL teams. And what was my second priority? The SEAL teams, the SEAL teams, the SEAL teams. Oh, and then down here somewhere was my marriage. And when my marriage wasn't working out, when I felt
you were
that
working out.
I was
I'm sorry.
but when later,
right, yeah,
after the divorce, but when it wasn't working out in the marriage, I would just stay at work. I would stay at work till 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, easy, and then get up the next morning at 4:30 and go to work.
Right.
I wouldn't even see my wife.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was another way of avoiding. So I've learned to, one, not avoid conflict. Like if there's a conflict in the conversation, to hey, let's open this up. Let's talk about it. Let's process it together. I've been more communicative. I've been more compassionate in understanding where another person in the relationship is coming from, and not just my angle, right? It's not just me.
Right.
So I think there was some narcissistic behaviors in my previous marriage.
And youth, I feel. I mean, I know
sure.
definitely, like, when I was younger, I was very fucking self-centric.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
yeah. So I think I'm better in those regards. I think my priorities are more in line with what I'm actually saying they are. And I think, again, these practices, meditation, mindfulness, allows me to know, oh, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't have said this that way. Maybe I should look at this. Maybe I should be curious about this particular challenge that we're having in our relationship and look at it from this angle.
Yeah, or put yourself in her shoes.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So, so I think that it has helped me to be more communicative, more compassionate, and
what about, like, more patient, or more like,
yeah. Oh my gosh, way more patient. Although my kids would probably argue, but that's a whole.
They're also pushing their buttons a little bit too,
100%.
right? And I think they know a little bit as well, right?
That's a part of growing up. That's a part of childhood.
Right. There you go.
Yeah. But yes, as far as with my wife now, infinitely more patient. So.
Right.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Wow.
Glad you did.
David, change your
for me,
your growth.
I mean, I think the biggest initial change is starting to rediscover me. Because when you are in a chaotic or toxic relationship, if I think back, it was like, I was buying a new pickup or a new car every couple years, or we were moving for my work, or we were always trying to get a bigger house or a new house or whatever. It was like I realized I was constantly changing the environment, but not the situation.
Right.
And so
not changing
when you're trying to make something work that hard, when I'm gonna fix this. I think you give up a lot of yourself, and it's like I'd forgotten who I was. And after the divorce, after that grieving, the initial grieving, maybe the first year or so into the second year, I started redefining myself. Like, oh wait, I don't actually like to do this. I like to do this.
Right.
And so starting to kind of get back to a place of like rediscovery and just starting to be more true to myself.
Yeah.
And that whole trust thing, it's like when you have this self-doubt or self-worth, or you feel like you failed, you don't really trust your decisions. You don't trust yourself, and you have to earn that back.
And there was that moment.
And it was, and I had to start earning that back. And then like the alone period afterwards of not sharing, of not talking to people, of just keeping it all inside. I was very lonely during that time period. I mean, I had someone new in my life, and when I was with her, it was amazing, it was great. But then when I was back home 3 hours away, I was stuck with me and my stuff and my mind and my shit and my, oh great, I should be reading this book, but instead I'm going to sit here and dwell on whatever. And so that took a lot of time to change. And what I also realized is going into my new relationship, I was still, my bag of shit still had a lot of shit in there. The divorce doesn't just make it go away.
Yeah.
You have to do work. It takes time. And again, my current wife, she's amazing. And she called me on my bullshit many, many times, where she would just look at me and pause and go, you're not speaking to me right now. So why don't you come back when you're ready to talk to me?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that really opened my eyes. It was like, oh man. So I had to do something, and it took some years, Thankfully, she's patient. I believe I showed her I wanted to make change. And, part of the reason I found Men Talking Mindfulness is knowing it's like a continual process. You don't just get divorced, start a new relationship, and life's great. No, you're going to have to work at it.
Right.
And it takes time, and it takes support and tools. And this is one of the tools. These two amazing individuals have affected change, positive change in my life. They make me a better human. They make me a better father, a better husband, a better friend. I mean, I am honored to be here, and I hope we can help somebody out there. And you're not alone. I mean,
sure we are.
It's an amazing journey that it never ends, I guess. So believe in yourself and keep putting in the time.
We're honored to have you here with us,
thank you.
too, brother. And I want to come back to the piece about finding yourself, right? That's a great point that I really hadn't thought of. A lot of the time in a relationship, you try to be something that you're not. And that's not always the other person telling you to be a certain way. It's just you thinking that they think that you want to be that way, or that they want you to be that way. And I think I put a lot of that on my ex-wife. She never voiced that she wanted me to be involved with horses, because we used to buy horses off the track and then train them to be hunter jumper English equestrian horses.
That's cool.
Equestrian horses. Anyway, so that's what I assumed, that she wanted me to be involved. So I got involved, and then I got involved with other things that she wanted to be involved with, but I really didn't want to be.
Yeah.
But she never voiced that. And I bet if I had said, you know what, that's your thing, sweetheart. You go and do that. I'm going to go over here and be me. She would have been fine. Because guess what? My wife now is. When I say, you know what, babe, you go and do your woodwork. I'm going to go run. And she's fine with that. As a matter of fact, she appreciates
it's okay.
She appreciates having her own things.
Right.
Like, I don't have to do everything she does. She fly fishes. I've tried it. I like it, but I'm not obsessed with it. That's not my.
Who's the man in this relationship? She's
that
woodworking
is-
and fly fishing.
That is very toxic.
I'm just,
you are being
easy.
toxic.
I'm just kidding. The toxic man showed up. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
But
we
yes,
can fly, fish, and do woodwork.
You know,
I'm just fucking
fully,
around.
I fully admit that my wife does things that are typically more manly, perceived by society than a lot of things.
Well,
I do.
yeah, you're right. It's so good to do things apart and together.
Yeah.
To have your own stuff,
Absolutely
because
makes the heart grow
when you're
fonder,
always
maybe.
trying to appease the other person, you're not being true.
Yeah,
You're not being truthful to yourself
Yeah.
or to that individual, and it creates resentment.
Exactly.
And it creates,
The resentment, man.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Resentment that creates tears
Well,
relationships.
drop into that. That's important, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
that's within
It
the
is.
relationship. As you're going through the
Right.
relationship, as you're like thinking, like, oh, is this gonna work? And this is right. Maybe try again today. So, like, how much did resentment like kind of add to that toxic soup of like, oh fuck, like this is.
I think that was huge. I resented my ex a lot because of how little time I had to do what I wanted to do, because I was constantly trying to appease her when she never said that. Again, and that resentment, it started as, you know, a little thing here, a little thing there, and then I would get angry because she wouldn't acknowledge my efforts. Right, my love language is words of affirmation, or my primary love language is words of affirmation, and I wouldn't get these words of affirmation, and then I'd be like, well, I went and did X, Y, or Z with you. How come you aren't appreciating it? She's like, well, I never asked you to. So, you know, it'd start with that, but then I started resenting her for her enjoying her time doing the things that she loved, and me not getting an opportunity to. And the irony was that was all my fault. That was my fault. And now coming back to your question before, where you asked about the changes that we've made and how we're different. Again, coming back to this previous response, I tell my wife now, Becca, hey, that's your thing. I don't want to go there, because I know, one, I don't enjoy it. Two, is it's going to build that resentment. But the irony, coming back, it's sorry, I keep saying coming back. But the irony is that a lot of that resentment that I held was self-created. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of. And if you're in a relationship and you're starting to feel that resentment, maybe peel back that onion and see, where is it coming from? Is it truly resentment toward the other person, or is it resentment that you have created? So
Yeah. And to that point, some of that resentment is created because we're not being truthful.
Mm-hmm.
We're not being truthful in our emotions, in our actions. Like, it's okay to tell someone, I don't want to do that, or I don't really enjoy that, but you can go do that.
Right.
Then you're being, if the other person gets upset or offended with you, well, that's their problem, because those are their emotions. But you're being truthful. You're saying, well, I don't really enjoy that. I mean, I think marriages that are struggling, there's resentment, there's competition between the couple. They're trying to like outdo each other, you know, or like someone has to be right. Like I'm right, you're wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. It's like, well, sometimes we just need to keep our mouth shut. It's like, is it so important to be right that you are going to get into an argument or into some, you know, altercation, and then you're not going to talk to each other for 3 or 4 days? It's like, no, I'd rather, we should be enjoying the meal in front of you, or the time together, you know. And when you were talking earlier about on the deathbed and, I made it through this horrible marriage, you know, it's
I'm going to look back now and be proud of my failed marriage.
I mean, one of the top things on people's deathbed is, I wish I would have done X. I wish I would have. It's like, then go do those things. You need to do them now.
And if you
because
need to get divorced. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'm not like, if you need to work on your relationship, right? Or if you need to find a way to work on your relationship, then go work on your relationship. But if it's not working,
I mean, made a comment about choosing the right partners. I mean, I tell my kids now, you know, I tell them, I'm like, look, you know, your mother and I didn't have the best marriage, and I do not wish that on you or anybody else. And if you are gonna get married and you're walking up the altar and you have a sliver of doubt, then just walk away. To my daughter, I don't care if I've paid for some lavish walk away. I don't the money, none of that matters. I would rather have you have a happy life. My son too. It's like, choose well, because you are going to spend the next however many years with this person, and you think you know each other, but you really don't know each other till you have to go out there and experience life together and make hard decisions and deal with money problems and have babies and raise kids. And man, that's a lot of stress and pressure. And choose well. And if you're not sure, walk away. Walk away.
Right.
The piece that you mentioned there that really, I mean, a lot of that resonated, but the one piece is the competing.
Yeah.
I know a lot of type A personalities, they want to compete. It's just kind of built into their DNA. Try not to compete, but also try not to overshadow the other person in a relationship, whether that's in a marriage or not. One thing that my ex struggled with was whenever I sat down with someone and they're, hey, initial conversations, we're meeting one another, and then they're like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, well, I'm in the Navy. And I'll try to kind of walk around what I did, just what we did within special operations. We didn't just jump right out. But after a while, they're like, okay, so what do you do in the Navy? Well, I work with weapons. Oh, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And eventually it's like, okay, man, I'm a Navy SEAL. And then they'll be like, whoa, it's just
right,
whatever.
It's amazing.
Hey, I appreciate that to a point.
Yeah,
but then they define me as that. They're like, oh, this is the SEAL.
Yeah.
But then my wife is instantly overshadowed. Like, she's like, oh, well, I'm an equestrian, and I've got my degree in criminal law, and I'm now a criminal investigator, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, well, we don't want to hear about you. That overshadowed piece actually caused, and I didn't appreciate that for the longest time. And I think that's something that if you notice that you're starting to overshadow your significant other, your spouse, in some way, or they feel that they're being overshadowed, have that conversation, and then try to empathize and work through that. So I'm glad you brought that piece up. So
maybe just one more thing. Let's talk about the financials of it. Whether what's the cost of getting divorced? Probably different every state. What is it like separating finances, separating assets? I hear a lot of men they go financial ruins when they get first divorced, because I guess they got to give so much to their wife and pay alimony and whatever else. If they have kids, it probably gets even worse. And a lot of men can really suffer that first year or two. I know I have people very close to me that that was their case. They had, by the end of all their bills being paid and alimony shelled out and the kids being taken care of, they had $30 to their name every month. So what was that kind of struggle like, David?
Yeah, for me, it was complete and utter financial ruin. I hit rock bottom and then took a step and fell in a crater. So I had to start from scratch. Like I said, we were fighting over nothing. Half of nothing's nothing. Then you get attorney's bills on top of that, and at least when I got divorced, the current, alimony was half of the number of years you had been married, and then child support on top of that and whatnot. And the way my divorce was structured, the amount of money that was coming out of my check. I remember our HR director at the time called me up when she got the garnishment letter, and she said, I can't legally do this. I can't legally take this much money out of your paycheck. And I said, no, it's okay. I agreed to it. It's okay, and for a number of years there, my current wife, when we started dating, I had my two younger kids. My older son already, he was already a young adult, but my two younger kids, I'd get to see him every other weekend, and she'd come from Seattle with her boys. Well, she'd go hit Costco before she drove down, fill up her trunk of the car with groceries, and bring them down, because I had enough money left to pay my rent, to pay my cell phone, and to maybe buy a few little tiny groceries, and that was about it. Pay my utility bills. So for the next few years, it was very hard, and it took some discipline, because like I said, changing the environment, buying a new car or whatever, buying whatever, a bigger house, this, that, and the other. I lived in a crappy, dumpy little duplex,
Right.
and I had some shame around that. I always had a nice place and a nice car or whatever.
Right,
It's
right.
like, you know what? You can get over the shame and all that crap, because the reality is none of that stuff matters.
Yeah.
Who you are doesn't change. Who you are in your heart, what kind of parent you can be to your kids.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of a little bit of a wake-up call and like a little reality check
and
for
a
me to go,
hard reset.
oh wow, I don't need all that other crap, and I don't need this stuff, and here's what really matters. And Nerf wars and the shitty little duplex, like epic
Yeah.
Nerf wars, right? And yeah, I have someone who loves and cares about me and my kids, and she's going to go buy a bunch of groceries and come down here, and we're going to have a fantastic weekend, and that's okay. I don't always have to be the man. I don't always have to be the guy paying for everything. I have someone who wants to share their life with me. Wow, this is okay. It was uncomfortable, but it was okay, and I was able to work through my whatever, what's the word I'm looking for?
Eating a giant piece of humble pie.
Yeah,
It
humble
sounds
pie,
like,
my ego, and
Yeah,
the
right,
man
all that
shame,
manness
all
of that.
all
Yeah,
of
it's
it,
like
right.
it's okay to ask for help, to accept help,
Right,
because
right.
guess what? Coming out on the other side, now I want to help people.
There you go.
I want to give
Right.
back. I'm on the complete other side of the coin of losing everything, and now it's like I don't wish. Again, some of these chapters I went through during the divorce, these phases, on anybody. Let's sit down, let's talk. Hey, let me give you some advice. If you don't want to hear it, fine. But hey, I'm here if you want to talk. And yeah, that's powerful.
For me, I was in a very different situation in that one, I didn't have children,
Right.
so I didn't have to pay the child support. But I've always kind of wondered, like the whole alimony thing, right? I know that's so that she can continue to live the quality of life that she was living when you divorced. That's the kind of the rationale behind alimony. I ended up paying her a huge chunk of change for 3 years. Luckily, for a year and a half of that, or I guess a year of that, I was in Bahrain, and then I was deployed. So I was when you're in the military and you get deployed to a combat zone, which the Middle East CENTCOM, Central Command, is considered a combat zone. So I was in Bahrain, living in a nice apartment, and I was considered to be in a combat zone. And when you're in a combat zone, you get paid extra hazardous duty pay, you get paid tax-free, all this stuff. So I was blessed in that I had that. But if I hadn't, and I had been required to pay the alimony that I did have to pay, it would have broke me. So I was very fortunate in that regard, but it does cost a lot. We again, coming back to the being lazy and not wanting to fight, we got divorced through LegalZoom. We didn't have any lawyers involved aside
And
from
that
the
worked?
one. It worked, but going back, I would like to have done that differently. I probably would have fought so that I wouldn't have to buy into that survivor benefit plan and all that other bullshit that I
Right,
mentioned
we would have
before.
probably found, if a
Yeah,
lawyer
but
would have been like, hey, let's look at
known.
the contract.
I would have known, right?
Right,
Exactly.
that's a good, anyone
Yeah.
out there listening, it's like, pay the extra money.
Yeah.
Know what, I guess, your
Yeah, and I'm
your
not
rights
saying
are.
like pay $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for a lawyer to like fight, but maybe pay somebody to at least guide you
And
through
read
it.
the fucking documents
the
or
document,
something.
right?
There's a lot of legalese in
Legalese,
these documents,
tons of it.
and
I'm
it's
like,
like,
I don't even know what this means. It's
yeah,
like taxes,
it's like,
right?
yeah, and they sometimes deliberately try to confuse
Oh,
you.
yeah.
Go like, it's
Oh,
so
for sure.
Oh, shitty.
But so yes, it cost me, probably throughout the alimony, $200,000 of alimony, something like that, and then on top of that, all the retirement. So she gets $1,300, $1,400 a month for the rest of her life that I'm alive.
There you go. Pays
So-
for a car. She's
Oh,
probably driving
easily.
a
That's
fat
a
car.
nice. That's
She's
a,
playing. I'm sorry. I just get that. I'm sorry. I'm like, I'm that guy.
that's a nice ass
fucking
car.
fat car. Yeah. Insurance and everything. Park garage. Valet. I'm kidding.
So,
sorry,
yeah.
John. Sorry.
Yeah. So anyway,
I gotta take my boys.
so I was talking about earlier. If I were to die, she gets a raise. Well, she won't because she's remarried, but if she dies, I get a raise.
You get a car.
I get a
You
raise.
get a car. You get a car. I'm kidding.
Oh, that's terrible.
I'm
That's
just kidding.
terrible.
No, I'm sorry. I'm having
Yeah.
fun. You know,
Yeah.
lighten the conversation.
It's a
Anyway.
tough subject, though. Yeah,
Yeah,
it is
yeah,
good to
yeah,
lighten it up.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh man, I didn't realize.
Oh,
that
no, all
was-
good, all good. Are we? I
No.
think that's it. I mean, we kind of like one thing maybe to close with. I've kind of already answered it, but if like, what is your? I guess you've already said like, what is your advice to a man that's already kind of like in this
Yeah.
situation? Like, right? I mean, on the fence about getting or no, like it's not gonna. In the heart of hearts, it's not the right situation. It's not the right divorce. Maybe then hanging in there a year or 2 or 3 years too long, and they have kids or don't have kids. Like any like, I mean, I guess no easy advice, but like from your experience, what might you say?
I would say, don't hang in for the wrong reasons.
Okay.
Like if you're hanging in for your pride, if you're hanging in for your religion, if you're hanging in for societal expectations, or because of what your family thinks,
Right.
you're in it for the wrong reasons,
Right.
and eventually it's most likely going to fail anyway.
Right.
If that's why you're staying in, get out. If
Right.
you're staying in because you truly love her,
No.
and you know that with some work it could thrive, then stay in. But yeah, divorce, it could actually end up with the two of you being happier. That's where I'm at. I'm a much happier person than I
Right,
was
there
in
you
that
go.
relationship.
Right,
And
right.
I know that my ex-wife is a much happier person in the relationship that she's in now. So why hold one another back from being able to attain that happiness just because of pride or
Right,
societal
right,
or familial
right, right.
expectations?
Yeah.
So I think assess why you're staying in. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And especially if you're married young, I think you change so much in your 20s and, you start a young family.
That's a good point
and that's
right there.
hard. That's
Yeah,
hard to leave
right.
that behind. But, I mean, yeah, to your point about being happier, my current wife and I now, we've been together for 16 years. We're going on our 13th year of marriage. Happy, amazing. We're modeling a great relationship to our kids now, both of our kids. And, it is amazing. You're not alone out there. If you're struggling, there are people there that are willing to help you, find help, reach out to folks. You will be surprised who does want to help you. And then for the fathers who have kids, it took some time. I did lose my kids for a number of years, like the closeness and the love and I guess the same relationship I had. But I think through consistency and just, I know who I am and now they know who I am, not as their dad, again, as a person. And I have the best relationship with my children now. I mean, they're young adults. They love hanging out with us. They love being with us. I can talk to them about anything. They can talk to me about anything. And I could not have envisioned this relationship with my kids when their mother and I were still together. And
Yeah.
what I have with them now is amazing. And they will come back to you if you're consistent and you're loving and, just, again, be true to yourself. Because if you are happy, your children will see that, and they will, feed off that happiness. So,
And if you're not, they're going to feed off that as well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you could be modeling future bad relationships and bad choices, if
For them.
you're for them,
Yeah.
right? And this is
100%.
this is the relationship. Mom and daddy are fighting, all the time when I was like 6, 7, 8, 10,
This is
15,
normal.
16.
Yeah.
Right, this is normal.
Right.
And what relationships are they going to have in the future?
It perpetuates.
Right, it
Yeah.
perpetuates, exactly. And what's the legacy you're leaving? If you're creating a home environment like that,
Right.
because you and your wife can't put it together.
yeah,
Yeah.
you
So-
can break that cycle.
Yeah.
Right, you can't.
100%.
Exactly. I think
Yeah.
this has been a
Yeah.
very thorough, hopefully
Very
a
thorough.
very useful relationship on episode on relationships and marriage.
Yeah.
But you guys have been. Thank you for all your vulnerability and honesty, and
Thanks
sharing
for the
from
great
the heart.
questions, man.
No, my
Yeah.
God, my pleasure.
Yeah.
It's like, and so when I get married, whenever the fuck that is, I got all the tools now.
That's right.
For
Hey,
a
if
good
you can single
relationship.
ladies out there, there's a single man. Hey.
Yeah.
And man, he's a hot catch.
Hey, and I'm mindful.
That's right. So hey, thanks for tuning in today. I think you want to wrap it up with the grounding practice.
Let's just
quick
do one
grounding
breath,
practice?
man.
Yeah,
one
another
breath. And maybe that's the place to start. Just get into yourself by finding some more mindfulness, taking some more breaths. Like, get into like, what is my heart saying? Like, this is a big part of it. What's my heart saying? So, John, you want to take us
I'll
into that
lead
one
that.
breath?
Yeah,
or two breaths,
again,
whatever you want.
let's ground our feet, and I'd recommend just put your hands on your lap, maybe palms up to kind of invite that sense of vulnerability and openness, but that vulnerability is a strength. And let's just begin by exhaling all our air, letting it out, letting that balloon empty, 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 hold, and deep breath in, into your belly first, then into your chest, and hold, and relax, and let it go, let it go, let it go. And thank you, gents, for a great conversation.
Right, we're still recording, I guess.
We're still live.
Okay, all right.
Still
Well,
live.
I'm sorry. I was like, what happened?
We're still live. Hey,
You know where to find us.
So yeah, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation, if you got something out of it, make sure you throw a comment in the comment section. Let us know what you got out of it. Let us know something that we missed, if we missed anything. And like, follow, subscribe, hit that little bell on YouTube, and hit us up for our other social media sites. Text MTM to 33777. That's MTM to 33777.
Yeah,
I'll let you wrap it up.
Yeah, hey, sponsor the show if you like. mentalkingmindfulness.com. Like, we'd appreciate that. And again, I really thank you guys. And let us know how you're doing out there. Let us know if you're having some trouble in your relationships, or if there's another topic or something you'd like to hear.
A resource.
Or a resource or something like that. Yeah. And get the help. Go get that help, guys, if you need it. So. Thank you, guys. It's been wonderful. And it's great to be in person, and hopefully we get to do more of these in the future.
Absolutely.
And thank you all for being here and making this show possible.
Till next time. Peace.